At Tampa Electric, we're proud to provide 99.9% service reliability in blue skies and gray. We're modernizing our grid to increase resilience for the families and businesses that depend on us every day. Year-round, we harden our system against extreme weather by burying power lines, maintaining line clearance, improving substations, and upgrading systems to restore power faster. Because the work we do now means reliable power for a bright future. Learn more at tampaelectric.com/reliability.
We have with us live and in person in the Terracotta Room, Senate President-designate Ben Albritton. He is currently the Senate Majority Leader, and he will be taking over as President of the Upper Chamber after the November elections. And I have to tell you, this guy is the real deal. We chat about citrus, we chat about his faith, his family. We talk about what his priorities are going to be for the 2025 legislative session. And he tells us something about himself that nobody knows except those very close to him. All right, we are going to have a lot of fun with the incoming Senate President, Ben Albritton. Please join us.
The recovery of the Florida citrus industry is incredibly important. It's important not just the DNA of Florida, it's important to rural Florida.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
What's going to be in your portrait?
So, wow, there's another one. Boom. That's a new question. As I'm reflecting, I guess we'll see in the end today, the most important things to me, clearly my faith and my family. What's interesting, if you look at the portraits on the wall,
yes,
right, they rotate. So I guess
yes,
it's my turn to have something in the background.
Yes, you need to have something,
yes.
Right.
So my faith and my family are what drives and motivates and supports me every day.
I think Wilton Earl had a lot of stuff in his.
He definitely had a picture of his family.
Yes.
So, I'm thinking along those lines. We'll see.
Okay.
Certainly, I love reading my Bible. I've fallen in love with Scripture. So, clearly that's important.
Yeah.
The citrus industry and agriculture
yes,
in Florida is not just, there are people that just say, oh, I love the industry, I support the industry. Well, I am the industry.
Let's
That's what I do every day.
talk about the industry.
So there'll be something, I'm sure.
Finish with the portrait. I asked you that. Now I'm stopping you.
It's okay. I'm
sure. How about
sure.
pets? Would you have your pets in there? I don't think we had. Was there someone who was on a horse once?
There was. Just over the door, right there on the right. What was the terminology? Pork chop gang or something like that?
Oh, that's right. He was one of the pork chop.
Panhandle.
That's right.
I forget his
Dempsey
name now.
Barron.
Maybe it was Dempsey Barron. Yeah.
Could have been. Yeah.
We probably will not have any animals
okay,
in the portrait. Probably a little more traditionalist than that, but we'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging me on that one. Let's talk about citrus, the citrus industry and agriculture. It's sort of interesting because you will be. I called him Wilton Earl because it's just me. But President Simpson, Agriculture Commissioner Simpson, he preceded President Pasadomo. He came from the agriculture world, and now we'll have really in close proximity to one another, you and President Simpson as leaders of the chamber. So you are in the citrus industry. I know I've edited a lot of stories about citrus greening over the past few years, and my family down in South Florida, I remember, you may not have been around then, but I remember the citrus Gestapo came and took their...
You're talking about citrus canker.
Yes, that was a different issue. Yeah, that was,
Yes.
I think the state finally did make settlements for the people who lost their trees.
We cleared that up
My aunt was
ago.
very unhappy about her loquat tree. I can just tell you, she still seethes about that loquat tree. But
well, sadly, growing any citrus in Florida today has become an immense struggle.
Yeah.
there's a disease, you brought it up, called citrus greening. It's a Labarbacter that affects the inside of the tree, and it's closely akin, not in nature, but as an example, it's closely akin to cholesterol in arteries. So what it does is every year it calluses and builds, it closes off, it starves off the tree, the part of the tree that takes, so nutrients and water go into the roots and then go up to the top of the tree. And inside the leaves, its photosynthesis produces energy and other food components, feeds the tree, produces fruit, and then late in the season finds its way to be stored in the roots again. The mechanism that takes, won't bore you with
it's not boring to
technical
me.
term, but
I was just in my raised beds checking out my peas and beans that are coming up. But go ahead.
good for you.
Yeah.
So anyhow, what it does is it starves off the tree little by little by little by little.
Right.
So 15 or 20 years ago, the industry was producing over 200 million boxes of fruit. This year, I think we're going to be around 20 million.
These forecasts come out and they keep getting worse and worse, and then it's like
bad. It's really, really bad.
Yeah.
Here's the good news, though.
Okay.
The good news
let's hear it.
is there are some therapies that are not GMO, by the way, which, there is not a GMO thing out there for greening. But in Florida, there are therapies of some materials that are super safe that you can treat the tree with, and it helps push off the effects. There are technologies out there that you provide covering over the tree for a period of time, and it keeps the little bug that transfers it, called an Asian citrus psyllid.
Okay. So it's bugs?
It's like a mosquito.
Right.
Yeah, the disease resides inside the tree, and it's
Right.
like anything malaria. So a mosquito is super effective at transferring malaria from one where it sucks the blood out,
Right.
and then it go bite somebody else, and then it transfers the malaria. It's just
Right.
the way that disease is designed, the way that the bug is designed, and the way that the hosts are designed. It just is super efficient.
It's like a perfect storm.
That's what we have in citrus. But here's the good news. There are
Okay.
therapies going forward that are producing good results. We have some naturally bred new citrus varieties. I'll tell you what's really fascinating, and I don't know if many of your listeners, maybe they garden and they see things happen in their garden, but there are trees they have found that are called escapes. And I know it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So they're an escape, which means they've escaped the grip of citrus greening. There's one called a Donaldson tree. The guy that bred the Donaldson tree passed away in
The
1968.
Donaldson tree?
Yep, passed away in 1968.
Donaldson or?
Donaldson.
Okay, yeah.
Donaldson.
Okay.
So they found the tree about 2.5 years ago or so in the Foundation Grove, they call it, in Groveland. There are hundreds and hundreds of varieties from the past in Florida that were at one point either viable or whatever. And actually, a good friend of mine was driving through that grove just looking to see what's standing up well to greening and what's not. And this tree just stuck out way on the backside of the property. It was the Donaldson. Big, big, juicy fruit. The leaves, it had signs of the disease with some discoloring in the leaves, but the leaves weren't little bitty mouse-eared anymore. They were big leaves like we used to have. So they started testing it. Lo and behold, it had greening. But that tree was productive, really highly productive, with greening in its system, which means it was tolerant. That led that tree to be what is designed and what is called an escape. So
That's the first time I've heard that term.
yeah, the first so 2 years ago we put together a crash program. This is when Senator Simpson was president.
Right.
It's been maybe 2 sessions ago, 2 years
Right.
ago. We did an expedited propagation program. So now the first Donaldson trees in a time as short as the industry has ever seen, there are going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of Donaldson trees that are available to plant commercially this summer. And that in itself, the expectation is it's very juicy. The juice is very tasty. It is.
These are oranges?
They're oranges. It's everything we'd really want to have. So we're going to start the trial. We're going to grow some in our own grow properties.
Are you?
A couple thousand of them, and we're going to see. The trick is this: if they stand up for a couple 3 years, out in the open, like they did in the Foundation Grove. They're very vigorous, one of the most vigorous varieties out there, which means they grow fast. We're going to know in 2 or 3 years, is this going to be part of our salvation or not?
Okay. So that's a short turnaround for...
Sure is.
Yeah, that is exciting news because it's been pretty grim.
Hope's been hard to come by.
It's with the storms, weather and development but the greening especially. So, and then competition from Mexico,
Brazil, Costa Rica.
Right. So it's been, a sad story.
Well, here's what I want to leave you. I'll leave you with this on this topic. I'm sure you probably have another question, but I'll leave you with this. I have, there are most of my friends back home grow something for a living. I'm a farmer. I'm a citrus grower. And citrus is in the DNA of Florida. And I will tell you this. It is the recovery of the Florida citrus industry is incredibly important. It's important not just the DNA of Florida, it's important to rural Florida, in agriculture in Florida. Agriculture is incredibly important to what Florida is.
Yeah.
Not just citrus, although we're running to that fight. I will tell you right now, you can talk to me after my first session. We're going to find out what run to the fight actually looks like. We're running to that fight. The industry is on the brink of something, I'm not going to use the word because it's very scary, but the industry is on the brink of a disaster like we've never seen. So we're looking for ways to deploy energy resources, you name it, at the state level to help intervene into what is, I'm not going to use the word again, but a really, really bad situation.
Yeah.
So there's some hope. The industry just needs a partner. They need some help to bring solution.
So before we move away from citrus, I want to ask you, what's your favorite kind of citrus?
My favorite kind of citrus? So there are different types. Obviously, there's grapefruit, and there are oranges. And then
Pomelo?
Pomelo is one. Yes, pomelo.
Did I pronounce it wrong? It's a pomelo.
Pomelo. Well, I may be pronouncing it
No,
wrong, but
I
that's
think,
what I've always heard.
Oh, pomelo. Okay,
Pomelo.
My friend has one of those trees here in Tallahassee, and they're like this big.
Kind of like a grapefruit, but it has really, really thick skin.
Very thick, yes.
Yeah, but it's very sweet too, by the way.
Very sweet.
Very,
I can't
very
eat
nice
it.
fruit.
Yeah.
So you have grapefruit, and then you have oranges.
Right.
And then you have what we call zipper skins, tangerines.
Oh,
Zipper, like unzip the skin.
Okay,
That's
I
just
gotcha.
industry terminology, zipper skin.
Yes.
And there's a zipper skin, so there are lots of oranges that I enjoy, lots of grapefruit that I enjoy. But one of the newcomers out there is called a juicy crunch. And I will tell you,
a juicy crunch. Now, divas, you are hearing this is
Juicy
we are
crunch.
getting real here.
I'm telling you right now, and I would, listener, I want you please to listen to me. If you can get your hands on a juicy crunch, do it. And then I'd love to hear feedback because it is the best piece of fruit I've ever put in my mouth.
And that's a zipper
Period.
skin?
It's a zipper skin. It's a tangerine, and it's called Juicy Crunch. It peels easily. It is almost...
And it's grown here in Florida?
It is.
You
It
wouldn't
is-
be advertising it if it weren't.
It is correct. Yes, ma'am. It is almost completely seedless. The sections are tender, but yet they separate very easily. It's easy to chew, very
Okay.
juicy, very sweet. It is the deal.
Wow.
I'm just telling you.
I see. I was thinking I wasn't going to get an answer on that question. I was so wrong. Wow.
Yep.
Let's talk about maybe 2025 legislative session.
Okay.
Maybe it's too early for me to ask you about this, but what your priorities are going to be. What are going to be the big issues that we're going to be seeing in 2025, and give us a little maybe sneak peek into what your priorities will be.
Happy to do it. It's a completely appropriate question. It's not too early, and I appreciate the question. So first and foremost, as you could probably guess from my background, if I cut myself, orange juice would flow out of me. So
You bleed just orange,
I bleed
orange
orange.
and blue.
I bleed orange. But what I will tell you is agriculture is on the radar, of course. I want to look for ways to enhance agriculture. Our food production systems in Florida matter. It matters. So food matters. There's this thing, and we're going to focus on defending Florida agriculture, enhancing Florida agriculture. And when I get to my second point, you'll see the nexus between this first silo and the second silo. But there's the food supply chain, fertilizer manufacturers, fertilizer distributors. There's so many people in the state of Florida, tractor salesmen, repair shops. Rural Florida is agriculture central. And it's easy many times to cast aspersions on the industry. But if you really think about what the industry is, I want to think about this for a second. And I would tell your listeners, don't take my word for it. Look around, do your own research. But food insecurity is substantially heavy in the continent of Africa and Southeast Asia. We produce Florida phosphate. It is in my district. Florida phosphate produces the commercial fertilizer that literally feeds North America. It supplies, last I checked, and I could be off a few percentage points, but around 80 or 82% of the phosphorus for farmers in North America, or in this United States, 80, 82%. Everybody knows that we're the breadbasket of the world. Wheat, corn, you name it, right out through the Midwest. You've got California and Florida and a little bit in some other states, but those are the two major producers of fresh fruits and vegetables. It's over 300 commodities grown right here in the state of Florida. Most people don't know that because they don't see it, right? We all live in a bubble to some extent, so I don't blame anybody for not understanding it, but I intend for that message to be seen. If we stopped mining phosphate in Florida, 500 million people around the world run the risk of starving to death. It's that important.
That is a very controversial.
Sure is.
You got like I forget which environmentalist group, but got really angry at you because of the fertilizer bill that you sponsored a couple of years ago,
Senate
right?
Bill 1000.
Okay.
And all that really, well, we can get into that at a later date. My only point is for the first silos, I'm not asking for anybody to say that any farmer, anything in the farm supply chain or food supply chain can be irresponsible. They've got to follow the laws. They've got to follow agency rules. They've got to use common sense, and I think they do. So the point is that the food supply chain is going to matter. But here's the deal. We could talk about that every single day.
Sure.
Well, this, well, that, well, this, well, that. But here's a piece that needs to be solved. I talked about food insecurity in Southeast Asia and the continent of Africa. You can turn on the television, you can see plenty of advertisements about those people, are starving. There's people in the state of Florida that are food insecure.
Yeah, there's a lot of food insecurity in our
bet
state.
You. And you know what? It is real.
And not far from here, where we're sitting right now.
That's exactly right. It is widespread. So what's happening is what's happened over the years.
There are people going to school and bed hungry right now.
There are families that the only food that a child gets is what they get at school.
Yeah.
So we agree on that, and
yes.
that is what it is.
Yes.
And anybody that pays attention knows that is right. So this is start with a premise that, and I'm a Republican, by the way, but start with a premise. Because I'm a Republican, I want to protect the Florida food supply chain. But secondly, as a Republican, I believe there's a difference between a hand up and a handout. And when you start talking about, I just can't get out of my mind. It's hard for me to have in my mind that there are kids in this state that are literally hungry. I've never suffered that myself.
Yeah.
I never have. So what's happening though, over generations, there's been a separation between the average person in Florida and the farm families, the farms of Florida. There's a lot of people, and I'm not saying anybody's done anything wrong. It's just been a separation of those two things. 75 or 100 years ago, you had to grow some of your own food. We didn't have a largely developed commercial supply chain for getting food to the public. Now we do. Publix, Kroger, you name it, right? Whole Foods. So people today are exposed to picking up food out of a a basket or off the produce aisle in Publix. But there's not a lot of thought, and why should they? Where did the food come from?
Right.
Right? So think about a day.
Fresh from Florida.
But I want to think about this.
We
for a
had
second.
Chef Justin on here too.
He's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he is awesome.
Very creative too,
Yeah.
by the way. So think about a day to where we could solve a lot of problems in one fell swoop. Number one, let's agree that just by nature of daily lives and everybody's daily walk, there is a separation of understanding between farm families and the farm community and the average person in Florida. Number two, that makes common sense to me. I believe that it exists because there's no reason for it to be any different the way the system operates. Number two, let's agree that there are people in Florida that are food insecure. That's pretty easy to choose too, right? Number three, there's a difference between a hand up and a handout. Giving somebody something every single day or every single week or every single month to, if they don't want to work or whatever, right? I look at those as handouts. But I view food insecurity as a hand up opportunity. And as a Republican, the same way I believe in clean water, and we'll talk about that in a second, I think the state ought to invest itself in designing a system that does two important things. First, reconnects Florida farm families in those food supply chain systems to people in Florida that are food insecure. What a match made in heaven.
We have a new email address, and we'd love to hear from you. To reach us and give us your input, tell us what you'd like to hear. Tell us what you thought about what you already heard. Tell us how fabulous we are. Join the Deeper Divas team. Send an email to podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. That's podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. And I promise I will read everyone.
We produce a huge amount of food, fresh food here. Beef, chicken, eggs, citrus.
Hooking up Florida farmers
to food insecurity.
Right.
Right, with fresh Florida products.
So are you talking about food deserts or food, like people, how do you do that? How do you create that infrastructure?
Right now we're working on that to try to understand. Hospitals could be a big part of it.
Schools.
Schools could be a big part of it.
I think schools to me feel like the natural nexus for some of that.
Absolutely could be. Remember, I'm only talking about at this point because you have to really understand the system and how to best have it implemented. I'm talking 30,000 feet.
Sure.
We produce a huge amount of fresh food.
Right.
We have people here that need it.
Right.
It's a hand up, not a handout. It's a compassionate view as a Republican.
Yeah.
And we can go a long way to helping to solve that right here.
We can fix this.
You bet we can. And at the same time, raising the flag to say, hey, Florida farming matters, and here's why. Look at all this good, right? There's a way to do all of that. And that's a different approach than we've used in the past. The second thing I will tell you is that water matters. So food matters.
Yes. Water
matters. You're going to see some enhanced approach to water quality enhancement here. There are some, if they make it through the veto, there are some water quality enhancement studies that are out there that are going to be taking a new, bolder approach to understanding where nutrients are coming from and where they're not. There are parts of the state to where when you look at the water quality relative to nutrients, there are some parts of the state to where it just kind of doesn't make sense that this part would be above the levels that are allowed and this part would not be. Sometimes it's the same water body, and you think
Lake-O.
Well, no, this is actually not. I'm not talking about Lake-O, although Lake-O is going to be a big deal.
Yeah,
Lake-O's in trouble, and we need to be thinking about ways to restore the ecosystem of Lake Okeechobee, and not just all the other stuff that happened. I mean, Lake-O, the personality of who she is, Lake-O. But we need to think about septic tanks. We really need to be thinking about septic tanks.
Oh my gosh, you guys have been talking about septic tanks, Senator, for 20 years up here.
Well, one of the things
at least 15.
Well, let me say this. One of the things that Wilton Earl, Commissioner Simpson, one of the things that Commissioner Simpson did was we take about...
He's going to love that we called him Wilton Earl.
I do. I love him.
Yeah.
He's been a great mentor to me. So we take about $250 million a year out of dock stamps, and that goes towards septic to sewer conversions.
Right.
But I want to take a more... And when we get closer to session, if you want, I can get into the nuts and bolts of a lot of different ways that we can look at water quality enhancement in Florida differently and look for some different results. And then third, I want to have a good, you ever heard about the book Six Sigma?
No.
What Six Sigma is about, and those are incremental, like 10% of the 10% of the 10% of the 10%. So you continue to create more efficiency, and sometimes there's the smallest ones, but it's a pursuit. You keep trying to build on it. So 10% of 10%, and then 10% of that 10%, and then 10% of that 10%. And next thing you know, you've moved the needle a pretty good ways on what was in the beginning a very small piece of the pie.
Right.
And many times it's the most important. So I want to take a Six Sigma look at Florida government in our budgeting processes and our policymaking processes. And I don't know exactly now the answer to how it will all be or can be implemented, but I know that evidence and outcomes matter. We do a pretty good job of doing financial audits to make sure nobody's stealing money and everything's accounted for. I think there's lots of opportunity. It happens some already, but I want to look for ways to expand the measures and the interactivity that happens inside of government to have, again, that honest conversation. It's happening, and I don't want your listeners to think it really isn't, but I want to expand that. I want to get the 10% of the 10%. I want to get it even better and even better and even better so that we know what we're getting from this program, what we're not getting from that program, where we're spending our money, what's the biggest, not just based on like how many people are served, but what about the outcomes? What are we getting for the money, and how are Floridians best being served by that? And look, at programs side by side and figure out maybe you're getting a 10% success rate, or maybe you're getting a 20% success rate, and maybe the population's pretty hard and 20% is dang good. Well, the question really shouldn't be, we'll take everybody's money and pour it into the 20%. Well, maybe the idea is have a little collaboration between those that work in that space, figure out what best practices that the one getting 20%, because they usually serve different areas of the state, what are the best practices that they're using that they've developed in their experiences over the years to get better results, and have the conversation with the people over here to say, hey, are you using this? I mean, that's some common sense stuff.
It's a big, lofty, kind of big, not lofty, but overarching sort of like
philosophy. And
looking at systemic analysis is what you're talking about.
Yes, and when you have a $117 billion budget, north of $80 billion is recurring, which means that money is assumed to be paid out every year. I was speaking to a group recently, and they said, I made a comment, that's an elephant, right? And the old adage of, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
That's an elephant. $117 billion, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of programs, which are opportunities for us to deploy this evidence-based budgeting. And somebody in the crowd said, Senator Albritton, we agree with your philosophy, but I disagree with you. It's not an elephant, it's a whale.
Right.
And I think, okay, I'll give you that one, right? Well, here's what you do. Just start on the front end and then work your way to the back.
Yeah.
So we want to have this discussion. Not prepared at this point to use specific measures or specific maneuvers, but my goal is I want people in Florida, number one, to understand we're not Washington, and there's a lot of people that don't make necessarily the
they don't know when they talk about your legislator, they don't know the difference. And really, the average person doesn't know the difference between their congressman and their state senator. So
you would die if you knew how many times I've been asked, how do you enjoy working in Washington? And I'm thinking,
they call you congressman, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. When I was a state rep, that was it, right? You were a congressman. And they don't make the distinction. And again, we're not being critical of anybody.
Right,
it's just, so I really want people in Florida to understand that state government is not federal government, and state government through the governor and his good work and his focus and through the House and the Speaker's work and their focus and the Senate through the President's work and their focus we're collaborating, not just a group of Republicans, but a group of people that are all, both parties. I mean, I don't think the pursuit of this kind of good government is necessarily partisan. So, if we can have the good, wholesome conversation about the food supply chain and people that are food insecure, and we can have a really wholesome conversation about water quality in the state of Florida, and not to even get started on water quantity, we better figure some things out pretty quick. And we can look at our government efficiencies in the Six Sigma idea. I mean, we've done really good. We've got enough reserves right now for Hurricane Ian, for another Hurricane Ian, and a Great Recession. The people of Florida should be thrilled with that. We've been fiscally responsible. We balance our budget. We've been investing a lot of money in spaces that matter, like transportation and healthcare. We've incrementally done some expansions in certain categories in Medicaid and looking for programs that Florida has for expecting mothers and all of these things. And we have this great fiscal shape. Man, could you imagine what if we get 10% better?
Right.
That doesn't mean anybody hadn't done their job. It just means there's always work. Society's always evolving. The legislature, because of term limits, is always evolving. The economy is always evolving. The question is it responsible for us to take a look at the way government operates today and work together to be able to, even if it's incremental, get better results? And I say, heck yeah.
Oh, I am really excited. I know I'm getting the side eye here. So
Yes.
I feel like we're getting to the end, and I really want to thank you. It has been such a pleasure chatting with Senate President-designate Ben Albritton, and we've covered a lot of territory. There's so many more questions I want to ask you. I will just give my little local thing a pitch. I am a member of a cooperative called the Red Hills Farmers. I don't know what it's called, Red Hills Online, and so I buy almost all of my produce from local farmers who produce locally, and I order it online. And
Good for you.
Yeah, so that's my little thing.
Fresh and local.
Yes, fresh and local. And before I let you go, this is my last question. And thank you again for being so generous with your time. This is really fun. Is there something that nobody knows about you that you'd like to share with our divas?
Well, I don't know. I'm so open and transparent with my wife. It's hard for me to say that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Okay. You tell me, what do you think my favorite type of music is?
I would say country.
Classical.
Oh my, okay, that really did take me back. Okay.
That's probably something now.
Really?
Nobody knows. I love Bach. I love Chopin.
I love Bach.
All of it. I will tell you that what I do is that what I find, sure, if I'm in like a kicked up kind of mood, it's country or maybe Christian contemporary or something. But when I get to a point, like I can get on a plane, I don't love flying. So when I get on a plane, I can put my earbuds in and play classical music, and it just...
Oh my gosh, I love Bach. I love the harpsichord music. I used to play the piano. I used to play the 2- and 3-part inventions. That was my favorite. So
Yes.
Do you play an instrument?
So years ago, I'm gonna claim no. All
Okay.
right? Years ago, I played the acoustic guitar, learned how to play it, played in a worship band in our home church back in Wauchula. I could find a G chord today. I could probably find an A, but I no. But what I will say though is that our son, our daughter Rebecca played the piano. She probably could sit there and play through some things now. Our son Josh, he's a worship pastor at a church in Osceola County. He's the one that is 23. So Josh plays multiple instruments, but basically stringed instruments, has a great voice, and is doing great. Our youngest, Ryan, is going to Belmont which is unbelievable for me as a dad. That's pretty cool. Belmont's an amazing place in Nashville.
Right.
He plays keyboard. He plays bass guitar. He plays
I
acoustic
played
guitar.
electric bass. Yeah.
He plays banjo.
Oh, wow.
He plays.
Talented family.
Well, I don't know where they get it. I can tell you because I was medium at best. But Ryan, and what's crazy is that he's going to college right now, learning how to read music. He totally plays by ear.
Oh, wow.
Missy and I went to a Chicago concert and Saturday in the Park. Great
Yes.
song, right? We went to, actually right up here at the Tucker Center. So we went to watch Chicago, and we came back, and Ryan was like, "Hey, how's the music?" You know, and this would have been probably 3 or 4 years ago. Couldn't play at that point. Couldn't read music at all. It's before he went to college. He was a freshman. So it was probably 3 years ago, I guess. And we played that song for him, and he went into what we call our playroom, when we have a piano in there, and like right then by ear figured it out, played the song.
Wow.
So we're super proud of all of our kids.
Yeah.
You ask about music.
Yes. You have to do a little bragging on him.
I need to do a lot of bragging on all of them.
Yeah.
All kids they're talented in different ways, but they are all fantastic human beings. They are honest, have integrity, have character. They all love the Lord. They live for Him every day. There's no possibility, none, that I could be more blessed. I am more blessed than I deserve every single day. My wife, my kids, the ability to work in this interesting and amazing process, the ability to meet so many people around the state, learn so much about human nature and people, to be able to see so many different parts of the state and the diversity that's in this state. I am blessed beyond measure.
Well, that is a perfect note to end our chat on. Thank you again so much. I'm going to call you Mr. President a little prematurely, and I got a little grin out of you for that. Thank you, and I look forward to having you back sometime soon.
Give me a call. I appreciate the opportunity. Love chatting with you. I look forward to the other questions that as I rambled and I ran out of time, we couldn't get to them, but I appreciate your kind words, and I'd love to come back.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.